goal of Stoicism is to attain inner peace by overcoming adversity, practicing self-control, being conscious of our impulses, realizing our ephemeral nature and the short time allotted. These were all meditative practices that help them live with their nature and not against it. It's important that we understand the obstacles that we face and not run from them. It's vital that we learn to transmute them into fuel to feed our fire. It's important that we understand the obstacles that we face and not run from them. Our guides to Stoicism today will be its three renowned leaders, Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius, and Seneca. Epictetus was born a slave at about AD 55 in Hierapolis, Phrygia, located in the eastern borders of the Roman Empire. Early in his life, he had a passion for philosophy, and with permission from his owner, he studied Stoic philosophy under the master Gaius Musonius Rufus. After Nero's death, the fifth Roman emperor who ruled with tyranny and cruelty, Epictetus began to teach philosophy in Rome, and then later in Greece, where he founded a philosophical school. Teaching Stoicism among his students was the future emperor of Rome, Marcus Aurelius. Marcus Aurelius was born in AD 121, considered one of the greatest Roman emperors to have ever lived, and wrote in his journal during the dull moments of a war campaign. In his journal, which inadvertently became the book Meditations, Huo served as reminders for Stoic principles that focused on humility, self-awareness, service, death, nature, and more. Seneca was also a Roman Stoic philosopher, statesman, a tutor, and advisor to Nero. His work involves dozens of essays and 124 letters that involve topics like education, friendship, civil duty, moral obligation, humility, self-awareness, self-denial, and more. He had many admirers like Montaigne, Tom Wolfe, Emerson, and John Stuart Mill. I'm going to share some of my favorite principles from the Stoic school of philosophy, most of them pertaining to these three thinkers. If embraced and exercised regularly, Stoic tenets will champion your creativity, facilitate your workflow, and improve your overall state of mind and life. Creative work requires us to be vulnerable, committed, adaptive, and courageous, and that requires a mindset that can readily negate distractions or negative impulses while focusing our hearts and minds on what's important. It's a tough balancing act. Without a philosophy to guide our work and life, we will relentlessly succumb to our excuses and, "Today I escaped anxiety." Or no, I discarded it because it was within me, in my own perceptions, not outside. Marcus Aurelius, Meditations. It is not outside forces that make us feel something. It is what we tell ourselves that create our feelings. A blank document, canvas, or unmarked to-do list is not inherently stressful. It's your thoughts that are stressing you out. Many of us want to place blame and responsibility on external objects because it's easy to do. But the truth remains that all conflicts start internally, in our minds. When we flee from reality, a deadline, an urgent email, we are doing nothing but harming ourselves and undermining our self-discipline. The next time you run into an obstacle and feel resistance, don't look at what's around you. Instead, look within. It is not outside forces that make us feel something. It is what we tell ourselves that create our feelings. 2. Find someone you respect and use them to stay honest. Choose someone whose way of life as well as words, and whose very face, as mirroring the character that lies behind it, have won your approval. Be always pointing him out to yourself, either as your guardian or as your model. This is a need, in my view, for someone as a standard against which our characters can measure themselves. Without a ruler to do it against, you won't make the crooked straight. Seneca, Letters from a Stoic. When I first started my blog and called myself a writer, who could I look up to? The courses at my university were irrelevant to my aspirations and desires. Luckily, the internet provided access to great writers, their stories, work, and admonishments. I can point to someone I respect and say, Look at the value they provide, their work ethic, their platform. That is worth learning from. Whatever you do, create apps, draw portraits, write books, or make animation films, there are individuals that you can learn from. You can study their story, works, techniques, successes, and failures. You can listen to interviews or even reach out to them by sending an email. You can discover patterns of success and apply it to your life. What's important to realize is that this isn't an exercise of comparison. If you don't get a book deal in 8 months, or if your product doesn't hit #1 in the first week, like your role model, that doesn't make you a failure. Instead, how can you learn from your heroes? How are their teachings and principles helping you grow, learn, and create? Everyone, no matter how successful they be, don't just say you have read books. Show that through them, you have learned to think better, to be a more discriminating and reflective person. Books are the training weights of the mind. They are very helpful, but it would be a bad mistake to suppose that one has made progress simply by having internalized their contents. Epictetus, The Art of Living. Reading books on marketing or business or creativity will supply endless dots that have potential for connection to develop a more in-depth awareness. But what will ultimately make you effective at that craft is by applying it. Reading prepares your mind, even helps you avoid foolish mistakes. But at the end of it all, there must be the result of some action. A failure, maybe a success, or a lesson. A consciousness of wrongdoing is the first step to salvation. This remark of Epicurus's is to me a very good one. For a person who is not aware that he is doing anything wrong, has no desire to be put right. You have to catch yourself doing it before you can reform. Some people boast about their failings. Can you imagine someone who counts his faults as merits ever giving thought to their cure? So, to the best of your ability, demonstrate your own guilt, conduct inquiries of your own into all the evidence against yourself. Play the first part of prosecutor, then of judge, and finally of pleader in mitigation. Be harsh with yourself at times. Seneca, Letters from a Stoic. It's hard to change habits if you aren't aware as to why you didn't do your work today and chose to watch Netflix instead. It's important to be mindful of the urges that obstruct us from showing up, engaging, committing, and being present. Why exactly am I feeling this way? Get to the bottom of that. Investigate it. Dissect it. When you feel resistance, use that as a cue to go forward. The challenge, of course, is training yourself to think that way. This isn't about talent or some unconscious reflex. The practice of self-awareness, to think about your thinking, in how you think, feel, and behave is a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it becomes. When you feel resistance, use that as a cue to go forward. 6. Reflect on what you spend the most time on, a key point to bear in mind. The value of attentiveness varies in proportion to its object. You're better off not giving the small things more time than they deserve. Marcus Aurelius, Meditations. That troll on your Twitter feed? It's probably best to not respond. You don't need to tell them where the you. 1. Focus on what you can control. The Stoics were big on this one. They believed that peace comes from understanding what we can and can't control. How many times have you stressed over something that was completely out of your hands? A traffic jam when you're running late, a rainy day ruining your outdoor plans, or a friend canceling at the last minute? It can be frustrating. But here's the thing. You can't control any of these situations. What you can control, however, is how you react to them. The Stoics suggest accepting things as they are, instead of how you want them to be. So next time something doesn't go your way, remember this lesson from the Stoics. Take a deep breath, let go of the frustration and focus on what you can do instead. You might just find that elusive peace you've been looking for. 2. Practice gratitude daily. The Stoics believed in the power of being thankful for what we have, rather than pining for what we don't. Modern science backs them up. Studies show that practicing gratitude can lead to increased happiness and reduced stress levels. So how do you bring a bit of this Stoic wisdom into your life? It's simple. Start each day by noting down 3 things you're grateful for. It could be anything: a warm bed, a good friend, or even a delicious meal. By focusing on the good in your life, you'll start to see the world in a more positive light and nurture your inner peace. So why wait? Grab a pen and start noting down the things you're thankful for. 3. Live in the present moment. The Stoics had a knack for embracing the present moment. They knew that dwelling on the past or worrying about the future only leads to unnecessary stress and anxiety. Personally, when I have something big coming up, I find myself constantly worrying about it and keep on thinking about the what-ifs. It takes me away from the present moment and my anxiety just gets bigger. What I am now trying to do is give this Stoic principle a go. Instead of worrying about the future, I start focusing on what I am doing at that moment. I try to fully engage in whatever I'm doing. It takes practice, but it's worth it. So next time you find your mind wandering off into the past or future, remember this Stoic principle. Bring your attention back to the now and watch as your peace levels start to rise. 4. Accept change. The Stoics understood that change is a fundamental part of life. They believed in embracing change rather than resisting it as a pathway to inner peace. Here's an interesting fact. Did you know that the ancient Greek philosopher Heraclitus, a precursor to Stoicism, famously said, "No man ever steps in the same river twice." What he meant was that the world is constantly changing, and so are we. Trying to hold on to things as they are is like trying to stop a river from flowing. It's just not possible. So, the next time you're faced with a big change, try to see it as an opportunity rather than a problem. Embrace it, go with the flow, and remember that change is just a natural part of life. It might not always be easy, but it's definitely a step towards finding that inner peace. 5. Cultivate compassion. The Stoics were not all about self-improvement. They also taught the importance of understanding and kindness towards others. They believed that we are all part of a greater whole, and that peace comes from maintaining goodwill towards our fellow human beings. Now let's think about it. How many times have we been quick to judge or slow to forgive? We're all guilty of it. But imagine the peace we could find if we chose compassion over judgment, kindness over criticism. Here's the heartfelt truth. We're all fighting our own battles, most of which we know nothing about. So, let's take a leaf out of the Stoic book and try to foster more compassion in our lives. The next time you feel the urge to judge or criticize, try to replace it with understanding instead. Remember, a little more compassion can not only bring peace to those around us, but can also bring us closer to our own inner peace. It's a win-win. Value action over words. The Stoics were firm believers in actions speak louder than words. They thought that true peace comes from living in accordance with our values, not just talking about them. If you aren't sure about your values, I have a free defining your values exercise you can do. Click here to find out more. So remember, actions do speak louder than words. If you want to find inner peace, make sure your actions are aligned with your values. It's truly a game changer. 7. Embrace imperfection. Life's not perfect and neither are we. The Stoics got this. They believed that peace comes from accepting our flaws and imperfections, not from chasing after some idea of perfection. We live in a world that's constantly telling us to be more, do more, have more. It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking we're not enough just as we are. But striving for perfection is like chasing the horizon. No matter how far you run, you'll never reach it. So, let's cut ourselves some slack. Let's embrace our quirks, our flaws, and our mistakes. They're what make us human. They're what make us real. Remember, it's okay to be a work in progress. In fact, it's perfectly imperfect, and there's a lot of peace to be found in that. So here's to loving ourselves, warts and all. The Stoics would definitely drink to that. 8. Practice moderation. The Stoics believed in the concept of the golden mean, finding the middle ground between extremes. They advised against excess and promoted a lifestyle of moderation for achieving inner peace. Here's an interesting fact for you. Did you know that the word Stoic comes from the Greek word stoa, which was a covered walkway in Athens where the philosopher Zeno taught this philosophy? His teachings were all about finding balance and maintaining moderation in all aspects of life. So how can we apply this Stoic wisdom today? It can be as simple as balancing work and play, eating a healthy diet without depriving ourselves, or enjoying our favorite pastimes without overindulging. Remember, life is all about balance. By practicing moderation, we can create a more harmonious life and find that inner peace we're seeking. So, let's strike a balance, just like the Stoics did. 9. Learn to let go. The Stoics were masters at letting go. They knew that holding on to anger, resentment, or regret only feeds into our own suffering and steals our peace. Here's how I learned this lesson. A few years ago, I had a falling out with a close friend. We said some harsh words, and just like that, our friendship was over. I spent months holding on to my anger and disappointment. Then, I came across this Stoic principle of letting go. It made me realize that by holding on to my grudges, I was only hurting myself. So I made the decision to let go of my anger and resentment. It wasn't easy, but it felt like a weight lifted off my shoulders. So, if you're clutching onto something that's causing you pain, try to loosen your grip.